Hello students, this is the second video that I'm recording to help you with the project for MAT120, which is elementary statistics. Hopefully all my college now students are going to be watching this video to help them with the second data project. That's going to be the project wherein they take the questionnaire data and they organize it and display it using different data displays. One of the problems inside of this project asked students to create a frequency distribution, and another part of it asked them to create a histogram. I'm going to be showing you how to do that today with Excel. At the end of the video, I'll talk briefly about creating this stem and leaf diagram and also answering question number 6. But let's get into creating a histogram. For reference, I already have some sample data that I collected just using fakery. It's all fake data. I didn't want to use real data for that, but it's okay. I can use these fake data to describe the process just as well as real data. Remember, this is my fake data from the last video. It's a questionnaire that I gave to 20 fake respondents and asked them about their age, gender, approximate GPA, etc. I already organized the category of age, and I already organized the category of ethnicity using different charts, a pie chart and a bar chart, respectively. I wanted to use a continuous quantitative variable for my frequency distribution, and I decided to use approximate GPA. I truncated all these at one decimal place, but I could have used any decimal places for this. So I chose this because it was an example of continuous quantitative data. So I took this column, which is question number 3, and I pasted it into its own separate little sheet. And that sheet is right over here. As you can see, I just copied them over. These are the 20 respondents worth of data. Now what I'm going to do is do a little thinking about what my frequency histogram is supposed to look like. Referring back to the first slide that I showed you, a histogram is supposed to look a little bit like this. It has vertical bars that talks about not specific pieces of data, but data that lie between two different points. So for example, this bar is all of the scores between 2.2 and 2.5. This bar is all of the scores between 2.5 and 2.8. All of these labels are indicative of these lines, and all of the bars tell you how many values lie between those two values. So between 3.1 and 3.4, I'm saying that there are 5 different values in my data set. So your continuous quantitative piece of data, your continuous quantitative question might have different numbers. But what I wanted to do is try to make it so that there were several bars. I didn't want it to make it so that there were only 4 bars or only 2 bars. I wanted to have as many bars as possible. I also wanted those bars to be meaningful. For example, if I looked at my data, which went all the way from 2.1 to, I believe there's a 4.0 or a 3.9 in here somewhere. Oh, just about 4.0. So if I went from 2.1 to 4, I wouldn't want to do bars from 0 to 1, then from 1 to 2, from 2 to 3, and then from 3 to 4. This would be a little boring. Yikes. Excel doesn't know what I want it to do. Anyway, I wouldn't want to do that because my first couple of bars wouldn't have any information in them. From 0 to 1, I wouldn't have anything. From 1 to 2, I wouldn't have anything. And then from 2 to 3, I would have a few things. And then from 3 to 4, I'd have most of the things. So I didn't want to do that. I wanted all the bars to be meaningful. So I went with my maximum and my minimum, and I tried to figure out, well, how can I get some bars out of this? And Excel can actually help you find your max and your min. So here's how I do it. With Excel, I can find the maximum value by using another formula. Remember, I started talking about formulas in the last video. I pressed the equals button, which tells Excel, and now I'm going to be calculating or figuring something out. And Excel does this thing where it predicts what functions you want it to use, or predicts the normal, most common functions. It gives average, it gives hyperlinks, it does count. Remember, we used COUNTIF in the previous video, and max is one of the ones that I want to use right now. So max is very simple. Max figures out the maximum number in a range. But I don't want it to only figure out the maximum number in one cell in A3. That would be very boring. I want it to find the maximum in this whole entire row. So instead of having Excel pre-populated, I'm going to type it in myself, equals max, and I put an open parentheses. Now, I could list all of the numbers out. I could type in 3.8, 3.7, 3.4, etc. Or I could just say, you know what, Excel? I want you to look at all of these numbers from A2 to A21, and I want you to find the maximum. I'm going to close my parentheses and press enter, and found my maximum very easily. So the max is 3.9. I can also similarly find the minimum by doing the same thing. I'm going to put equals and then min and then open parentheses. I know my range is from A2 all the way to A21. Your mileage may vary on A2 to A21. If you copied in your data and you had 23 respondents, you might have to go all the way up to A24, because remember, the first cell is going to be your data header. Anyway, finding the minimum is 2.1, and now I know that the smallest number I have is 2.1 and the largest is 3.9. Once I have that information, this isn't necessary for you to do, but it's helpful for planning. Now that I have this information, I can try to figure out how to arrange my categories so that I have several bars that will show the shape of the distribution. Now, in the example that I showed at the beginning of this video, this example right here, the histogram has from 2.2 to 2.5. So 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, 2.5. It has several different values in between here. It has several different values in between here, etc. And this goes from 2.2 to 2.5, which actually takes care of 4/10ths of a decimal place. It takes care of 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, and 2.5. Instead of doing that for this video, I'm going to skip by 3 values instead, just to show you that it does not matter in what way you organize it, because Excel will just figure it out. So the first bar that I'm going to have is going to start at 2.0. You want to either start at the minimum or just below it. And then I'm going to go all the way up to 2.2. And that means all of the values in between 2.0 and 2.2 are going to be within this category. We're going to call this a class or category. Remember, we talked about that in class. That's not a pun. And then the next class I can make, well, I can't make it 2.2 because the 2.2s are going to go in that class. So then I'll go 2.3 going to 2.5. I can continue on until I exhaust all of these classes. All right, so it should make sense to you that from 2.5 we would go directly to 2.6 and then to 2.8. The next one is going to be the next higher one. I can't put 2.8 again because if I put 2.8 here, then I wouldn't know where to put my 2.8. Would I put it in this class or would I put it in that class, right? So I can't have overlap in my classes. I'm going to go to 2.9 and then to 3.1, and then from 3.2 to 3.4, 3.5 to 3.7, and then 3.8 to 4.0. And it should make sense that I'm going to cap out at this because my maximum is 3.9. Now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 classes, and all of those classes are going to be need a frequency now. Once I make my classes, the next thing that Excel needs is what's called a bin value. I'm going to write bin here. And what bin means, it's very similar to class, but bin means Excel is going to count all of the values that are up to this value. In other words, I'm going to write 2.2 here. And the reason I'm going to write 2.2 is because that is the highest value that's going to be in this class. My bin says pick everything up until this point. Then if I put 2.5 here, it's going to say to itself, I'm going to pick all of the values that are between 2.2 and up to and including 2.5. I'm going to do the same thing here, 2.8. And you might have seen it before. Maybe pause and rewind the video. Excel tried to fill it in for me. Instead of letting Excel fill it in for me, because usually Excel is pretty smart, but it's not always that smart, I'm going to do it myself. So this is 3.1, this is 3.4, this is 3.7, and this is 4.0. The reason I'm doing this is because Excel doesn't always exactly understand what this means, but it'll always exactly know what bin means. And again, bin, if you're writing this down, bin is going to indicate the highest value that the data points go into. So now that I have my classes and I have my bins, I'm going to ask Excel to do a little data analysis for me. And you see a little button over here that says data analysis. I want to show you how to access this on Excel if yours doesn't have it. So right now I'm in the data tab. And in the data tab, there should be a section called data analysis. If it doesn't say that, that's okay. Your Excel is not broken. You need to go through a list of steps. I wrote those steps down here. So what I did was I clicked on File, and I clicked on Options. Now, data analysis is not something that it automatically installs in Excel, but data analysis is an option that you could have. So if you go to Add-ins. If you go to Add-ins, there are all of these different add-ins that can be accessible for Excel. For example, I have Smart Ink because I use Smart Notebook on my computer, but yours probably doesn't have that. If you go to the bottom where it says Manage Excel Add-ins and click Go, there is a checkbox that says Analysis Tool Pack. This is the one you want. You don't need VBA, you don't need Visual Basic. We're not going to be doing anything like that in this class. Analysis Tool Pack will do the job for you. Since mine is already checked, I'm just going to click OK. But if you just checked yours, your data analysis would then pop up. Okay, so now I have all the information I need in order to make my frequency distribution and my histogram. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on that data analysis button. In data analysis, there's a lot of cool things we can do. We're going to be picking on some of these things. Keep regression in mind, keep t-tests in mind, because we're going to be coming back for those things, z-tests. But what I want to do right now is do a histogram. Notice that it doesn't say frequency distribution, but frequency distribution is actually going to be calculated at the same time. This is a little 2-for-1 deal. So click on histogram, click OK. Notice that we didn't highlight any data yet, so I'm going to be very specific and tell Excel exactly what I want. So for my input range, the input range is the actual data that I want Excel to be putting into these bins. I don't want to do it myself because that seems like a lot of work. So for input range, I'm going to click inside of this box, and I could type in where my data is, but you know me, I'd rather click and highlight to show all of the inputs. I'm not going to click the header, which is approximate GPA. I'm going to add that in later. I could have clicked the approximate GPA header and selected labels to tell Excel, listen, I'm giving you labels as well. I decided not to do that. Now for bin range, I gave my bins here. Please be careful not to click the classes because remember, Excel doesn't really understand this. Excel doesn't know what this hyphen means. Excel understands go up to and including this value. So for bin range, I'm going to click on bin range, and then I'm going to highlight all of the bins. All right. Now for output range, it wants to know where to put this stuff. You could put it in this same worksheet because you made a separate worksheet that says frequency distribution. It doesn't matter where you put it, just put it to the side here somewhere. I'll click on this box here, this cell. That means it's just going to start the frequency distribution table here. And keep in mind, I want a frequency distribution for my output. And I also want a chart output. I also want a histogram. Remember we talked about Pareto charts in class? I don't really need that. A sorted histogram is going to be a little confusing because it's going to rearrange it in order from greatest to least. So I just want the chart. When I click OK, it's going to, oh boy, it's going to give me an error message. Output, oh, duh, I did the thing that I told you not to do. Remember when I said to click in the cell? Go to bin range and give it the real bin range, which is these guys. And then for output range, click the cell and then say, I want you to be outputted over here. If you caught that the first time around without having to pause and rewind the video, nice work. Anyway, so if you click OK, it's going to give you two things. It's going to give you a cool frequency distribution table. And it's also going to give you a cool histogram, which shows you the general shape of this data. I would say this data is maybe more or less having a tail off to the left here, so I would say it's skewed left. And I could also take this frequency table and make it into a real frequency table by taking the classes that I made before, pressing Control-C to copy and putting them somewhere else on the sheet, doesn't matter exactly where, and then saying, well, I don't want bin to be in my table, I want frequency to be in my table. So I'm going to press Control-C to copy and Control-V to paste. Now I have class and frequency. You can get cute by making them both bold, making neither of them italics or italicized, getting rid of all of these borders. I think I remember how to do that, no borders. Yeah, you can get really cute with it, but this is how you make a frequency table. So now, in this video, I've showed you how to make a frequency table and a histogram. I promised that I would talk about the stem and leaf diagram, and all I have to say about that is you're allowed to make this stem and leaf diagram, this one, by hand. So I would like you to do that by hand. Also, for the pie chart, I went over how to do the pie chart in the other video. Check the Google Classroom for the link to that video. All right, if you have any questions, please email me, and good luck finishing this project.